Good afternoon. It's good to be with you today. And I see my clock in the back, so I will be mindful of our time. Just to give you a little bit of a snippet of my background and why I'm here, I'm not here in the capacity as Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, although that is a role that I play here in the city of Frisco. I have been in corporate for about 32 years. I started my career with the Walt Disney World Company as a recruiter right out of college and worked my way to be the director of human resources for the Magic Kingdom, which is really cool until you have Mickey take off his head and cuss you out, and then you get a different perspective of Disney. So we won't go there. Then I left Disney and went on and spent a significant portion of my career with the PepsiCo organization, Pepsi and Frito, going back and forth between the two. They're all they're interchangeable, although the Frito people will tell you that they are the real engine behind PepsiCo. And yeah, I have some Frito people in the audience. So had a great opportunity working with Frito PepsiCo and was the vice president of HR for our sales division there for a number of years. And then went on to a number of roles after leaving Pepsi, in which I was the chief HR officer for companies such as Cinemark Holdings, the movie company, and Dave & Buster's. And then about 4 years ago, I decided to get off the corporate track after about 30 years and open my own consulting firm. And so I'm a solopreneur here in the Frisco market. My office is in Frisco Station. I do all things human capital consulting, from strategic planning, executive offsites, leadership development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you name it. If a CHRO or CEO calls, I can probably figure out how I can help them. So that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years, in addition to my role on our city council. I'm excited to be here because I love the opportunity to talk with small business owners and folks who are continuing to build their career in corporate. I like to share a little bit of my learnings, especially in today's market, when the dynamic of the workforce has changed so significantly, right? Everything looks completely different in terms of how we operate. 5 years ago, if I sat down with a CEO and asked him or her, would they even entertain having 50, 60% of their workforce not ever coming into a physical building, they would have looked at me as if I was crazy. But today, that's what's happening. You have people redefining what workspace looks like. And that's changing the paradigm of how we lead our businesses and how we lead in corporate today. So one of the lessons learned that I'm really working with my clients on is culture is not a place. Culture is not a place. Culture is an experience. Culture is an experience. And I will tell you, if there's one company that has figured out how culture works, it's the Walt Disney World Company. There are very few people who walk into Disney and walk away not feeling changed because of that magical experience that Disney seeks to create with each and every guest. Why does that happen? Because they're very intentional about it. The other thing that I want to impart is, not only is culture not a place, culture is not haphazard. You don't stumble into having a healthy culture. Culture is all about intentionality. And so what companies are really struggling with today when it comes to culture is, well, how do we do it? We've got 60% of our workforce that's working geographically dispersed. How do we keep our culture? And the question that I then ask them is, well, let's talk about, how are you defining culture? Because if you're defining culture by virtue of being in the same space at the same time in four walls, we've missed it. Because you can create an experience for someone and never even see them that entire day. So culture is not about whether I see you, whether or not you're in the same space with me. Culture is about, how do I make you feel? And that's the soft stuff that sometimes we don't want to take the time to sit down and dialogue around. But that's what culture is about. Culture is, how do people feel and experience my business? How do people feel and experience what I have to offer? And so culture is not only internal in terms of how your employees feel about working in your organization, culture is the external aspect when people walk into your facility, when people have an interaction with you. What culture will they describe as a part of their definition of your organization? So being very clear about culture is really important, certainly in today's environment where we have no boundaries in terms of how we define the workplace today. But consumers have more and more choices than they ever have. There's probably not many businesses out there today where you're the one and only of your kind. Consumers have choice. So how do you ensure that their choice is your business? You focus on how you want them to feel and you work your way from that. Now, the problem with that is many organizations want to sit and focus on just the P&L. And so when you start talking about culture and how people feel, that feels a little squishy to a lot of our finance folks because you can't really write it down and put it on a P&L. But more and more today, companies like McKinsey and others are showing how you can do a dotted line between the squishy and the culture and the impact on the bottom line. So focusing on culture is not a nice to do, it is a must do. And the question, I think, as business leaders, whether you own your own organization or you're working within a company, is how do people define culture in my organization? The other thing to keep in mind is there is the overarching culture of your business, but then there are subcultures because of each and every leader in your department or in your organization. They create a subculture. And what's that subculture? Are you a part of a subculture that makes people want to stay with your organization? Or are you a part of the subculture that makes people want to run away? It's one or the other. Data tells us that people leave leaders long before they leave companies. Long before they set foot outside of your organization, long before they accept that call from a search firm, they have already disconnected from you as the leader if you are not a strong leader. So being mindful that culture matters. The second thing I wanted to cover as I'm just giving you some insight from what I'm seeing in the workplace today, whether it's small business owners or whether it's large organizations, is as leaders, emotional intelligence matters. We have so many people out there that are so technically capable, but so emotionally deficient. And unfortunately, that's what's cratering organizations. And a lot of that is what's cratering the Great Resignation. You hear about people resigning from organizations and leaving companies. The real issue is those people still have to eat. So they're not just resigning and going home and not eating. They still have to work. So that's a comfortable scapegoat for us to say, well, yeah, they left because it's the Great Resignation. What's your role and why they're resigning? They're going to work for somebody. They just didn't run into this windfall of cash and now they're not working. So what is your role as a leader in this Great Resignation? And the data tells us that most leaders don't struggle with the functional aspects of their job, competency-wise. It's the emotional intelligence. It's the ability to connect with people. It's the ability to be self-aware and to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, what are the deficiencies that I have? Why am I not connecting with this individual? What unconscious biases do I have with this particular individual? Being true to yourself, putting that mirror in your face and seeing the cat and not the lion. And we've seen that analogy where you've got the cat on one side and the lion on the other, and people see themselves as the lion when in actuality, they may actually not be that at all, but being very real and true to yourself. What am I doing to cause people to want to leave my organization? If you have turnover and you're seeing people over and over leave, the question may not be where are they going, but why are they leaving? Not where are they going, but why are they leaving? What am I doing? What's happening in my organization that might cause this individual to want to run away from me? So being mindful of how you interface with people, how you interact with your employees, not seeing your interaction with them as an interruption, but as an opportunity to engage. I remember early in my career, and I've gone through a lot of these lessons learned as a leader, both as an entrepreneur and a leader in corporate America. So I'm not sharing with you something that I haven't already learned or experienced myself. But early in my career, I was very focused on getting the job done. And that was what mattered to me, getting the work done and being very competent in getting the work done. What didn't matter to me, although I would never say that, but what didn't matter to me was interacting and interfacing with my people to get the job done. I wanted them to do what I needed them to do, and that small talk, that interaction, that relational piece, that emotional intelligence piece, I didn't spend a lot of time on it because I didn't value it until I hit a brick wall and realized, wow, the only way I'm actually ever going to be successful as a leader is I slow my roll and I engage and interface with people and I make people realize I care about what matters to them. So how many of you, just by show of hands, actually lead more than one or two people? Many of you have people that you lead. How many of you know what your individual direct report's vision is for their life? Got a pretty good understanding of what they want to do in life, what some of the stumbling blocks are, what some of the historical barriers that make up who they are. Not a lot of people spend a lot of time on that because you don't feel like you have time to. But I'm here to say and to contend with you, you don't have time not to. Because the time that you spend backfilling and training and recruiting to go out and find new talent is money and time that you could have invested in that individual that you have. So think of that person that if they walked in on Monday and gave you their 2-week resignation, you would bristle. It would be like a gut punch. Ask yourself, do I know what they want out of life? Do I understand what barriers they're facing? Do I understand how I can help them remove those barriers? Those are the kinds of things as leaders today, in the era of the great resignation or the great reevaluation, these are the kinds of things that we should be thinking about. How do we connect with people and help them understand that you care about their career and where they're headed? Because it's going to be the emotional ties that are going to stabilize the workforce. We're going to throw money at people, but for people who are money hopping, they're going to hop to the next job. We're going to throw flexibility at people, and for people who want to be off on Tuesday and Wednesday, they're going to find a job that says you can work Tuesday and Wednesday from home. But it's going to be the things like, do you offer career opportunities for that individual to reach their full potential? Does that person know that you are concerned about their well-being? Are you spending time in ensuring that that person is mentally stable and healthy? Because the one thing that COVID has shown us is that mental health is a thing, and it's a real thing. And now with employees being geographically dispersed and not having the ability to socially connect, people feel isolated. And so mental health now is given a foothold because now people don't have to socialize like they used to. So how are you connecting with your employees from a mental health perspective? Are you giving them an opportunity to share with you, hey, I'm not okay? And then are you providing resources to your employees? These are the kinds of things that are going to stabilize the workforce today. It's not going to be throwing more and more money. And we're seeing that. Companies today are throwing, upwards of 3, 4, 5% of their budgets towards increasing compensation, but inflation is eating that up. And so employees are now still holding out their hand wanting more because, hey, you just gave me something, but inflation just ate that up. So now I want more. So at some point, financially, you won't be able to satiate an employee's desire from a financial perspective. So you're going to have to figure out what you can become good at. Jim Collins talks about the hedgehog principle and what you can become good at. What can you really become good at as a business owner, as a leader, to really sink your teeth into this whole notion of retention with your employees. How do we really ground our employees? And it's going to be through the avenue of emotional intelligence. It's going to be through the avenue of connecting with your people. The other thing that I've seen this particular time and space really put pressure on leaders is to be able to connect virtually in a way that is significant. Be able to show people emotion through the phone, be able to make those connections with people that transcend the physical barriers that we have today. One thing I want to be really point out, and this is one area that I have seen leaders struggle with when it comes to the workforce today, is failure to be vulnerable. No one wants to be vulnerable. When you say the V word, everybody gets bristly. I don't want my employees to know that I'm struggling. I don't want my employees to know that I have issues. I don't want my employees to know that I don't know what I'm doing. And vulnerability has been one of the most significant areas in the workplace today that I have seen leaders really fail to make that connection, especially in today's environment. Understanding how to be controlled vulnerably and how to let employees know, you know what, I'm still figuring out how to be a leader in this virtual arena. And nobody wants to say that. I'm still figuring out how to become a leader who knows how to lead a diverse team. Nobody wants to say that. And so the vulnerability allows us to hide behind our pride, and we never get to what we need to get to in order to connect with our employees. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to understand how to connect and interface with a diverse team. Many people do not. I can tell you, I interface with leaders all the time, especially on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's probably, those three letters probably just cause people to shudder when you start talking about it. Because nobody wants to be vulnerable and say, you know what, I don't know everything about this topic. In fact, what I do know may not even be acceptable. I may have been raised in an environment where bias existed and was celebrated. So how do I now make this connection with my employees when I can't even say that I don't know what I don't know? And the reality is, it's okay not to know, but it's not okay to stay in ignorance when you don't know. You have to be willing to make a move, and you have to be willing to learn, even if it's at a snail's pace. So these are just a few things that I've seen in the workplace today as leaders, whether you are in a corporate setting or you're an entrepreneur, the landscape has shifted. And the key is to be nimble and to shift with it, to be willing to reinvent yourself. I grew up in an environment where I had to reinvent who I was. Today, people look at me and they assume the type of lifestyle and upbringing that I had. How many of you would probably say, wow, looking at her, hearing her background, she probably grew up in a decent middle class home, maybe had, the basics and the necessities of life. Probably would not realize the level of reinvention that I had to undertake to be where I am today. But that's a part of leadership. That's a part of being successful in business. That's a part of being successful in life, is looking at where you are, determining where you want to go, and realizing there are some changes and some reinvention along the way that I have to take. I grew up in a mobile home. It wasn't until I went to college that I realized that houses didn't have wheels on them. I grew up in probably the depth of poverty. I was the 8th of 9 children. Neither of my parents graduated high school. My father, because he was a hard worker, would go out and do repairs, electrical, plumbing, whatever he could find. He was an unskilled laborer, and he went to this very wealthy school, probably one of the wealthiest private schools in Pensacola, Florida, where I was born, and he kept doing plumbing, and he kept fixing up this place, and he kept showing up whenever they had a need for repair. And finally, one day, the head of the school said, George, we want to bless you. You're always reliable. You never charge us. You never overcharge us. You're just consistent. How can I bless you? How can I impart something to you in addition to your pay? Do you have a child that's within the age range of the school? And my dad said, yes, I've got 8 children, but one that's within this age range. And they said to him, George, we want to bless you. We want your child to come to this school, no charge. We will make sure that somebody picks him or her up because we know that you have limited transportation. And I was that one child out of 9 who went to the most elite private school in Pensacola, Florida. So other 8 siblings went to public schools. And so there's some reinvention that had to happen here because not only was I a fish out of water in this school, I was the only African American child in this school. So I was brand new to a sea of children who really had not interfaced with an African American child. I was impoverished, so you can imagine I didn't have on the designer clothes that they had. But that was the environment that I was thrust into as a young child. So I was trying to find my sea legs in that environment, trying to reinvent myself as a baby in that environment. And then I'd go home to my siblings who said, she's the one that goes to the white school. She thinks she's better than us. So that was the life I lived. I didn't fit in at home because I went to the white school, and I didn't fit in at school because I was the black kid. So I had to figure out really quickly and early in life, who in the heck am I? Because I'm not who they say I am, and I'm not who they say I am. God, you have to tell me who I am. And I thank God because my parents did instill in me at a very young age the presence of Christ in my life. And so I had to really get very quickly grounded in who in the heck I was because everything around me was telling me that I was somebody that I was not. And I even had to, in the private school, I ended up wearing other people's clothes. So I had to get really comfortable, not only in my own skin, but in other people's clothes because they'd clean out their closets. And of course, you know, everybody wants to be known as the charitable one. So give your clothes to the poor black girl. So I wore their clothes to school. And I had to endure them saying, hey, don't you have on my dress? Yeah, my mom gave you that because you're poor. And then I go home and I have my siblings go, yeah, you get to wear all the designer clothes because you go to the white school. At some point, you have to know who you are. In business, in life, in politics, know who you are and be grounded in that. And don't let anything shake who you are if you know who Christ created you to be. And so in every situation, regardless of how I have been reinvented, whether it's been in corporate, whether it's been in politics, whether it's been an entrepreneur, I've got to stay true to Angelia Pelham. In the face of all adversity, I've got to know who in the heck I am. And God taught me that lesson early in life. So that is my final lesson to you. Know who you are and don't let anything around you shake the foundation that Christ has placed in you.